What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of Pistons Daily, where you can find daily content covering all things Detroit Pistons, Monday through Friday. As always, I am your host. My name is Kyle Garrison. I'm over on Twitter at Kyle Garrison2, where I talk all things Detroit sports. So head over there, give me comments, questions, concerns. I'd love to hear from all you guys. Also, shout out to everyone who tunes in every single day. The channel is growing at an unbelievable rate, and it is all thanks to you guys. We are on the road to 2,000 subscribers, so if you are not subscribed, I would greatly appreciate it. It would go a long way to support the channel. But with that being said, let's jump right into today's video. So the first thing that I wanted to touch on is our underrated skill of the day. Then I'll dive into who I think the Pistons' X factor is heading into 2025. Then I'll go over Frank Urbina's point guard rankings over at Hoops Hype and where Cade Cunningham ranks. And then before we wrap things up, I wanted to touch on the Pistons kind of being in that national spotlight and just what that means for this team going forward. But first things first, let's talk about Isaiah Stewart's switchability. So I think this is one of those skills that's pretty hard to back up with advanced metrics and stats. I know I've been giving a lot of numbers for these underrated skills, but this is something that you really just have to observe by watching the games. And if you watch Isaiah Stewart play, you can see when he gets switched out onto a guard, a majority of the time, a guy of his size would be at a disadvantage. But with his ability to move his feet laterally and even if the offense does get a little bit of a step on him, he's athletic enough to catch up with the play and either play help defense on the dump off, or he can track the ball and get a piece on it as well. And his overall IQ on defense is through the roof. We've seen that from year in and year out. And this kind of allows him to have that switchability where you're not too worried when he is switched out onto a guard. He's going to hold his own. Sometimes he might let up a layup or he might let up a tough step back three, but a majority of the time he's able to keep up with these quicker, smaller, more agile guards. And it's just very impressive to watch. I dove into just some of his perimeter defense highlights, and he has clips over the last few years where he's checking some of the most explosive guards in the league. There's times where you saw him check Darius Garland, who would cross right left, get to the cup. Isaiah Stewart was right there for a block. I saw a clip where he switched onto Stephen Curry, who was on a downhill drive to the left, and he recovered for a block shot. There was another time where he altered a Luka Doncic drive to the rim as well. And my personal favorite was from this past season. And there was a possession where Tyrese Maxey of the 76ers, he drove hard to the left, got completely cut off by Isaiah Stewart. So Tyrese Maxey, naturally, he re-isolates at the top. Nobody comes to help. Isaiah Stewart is in complete isolation on an island with one of the quicker guards in the entire NBA. Stu stays in front of him, forces a tough three-pointer late in the shot clock. Tyrese Maxey airballs. The Pistons go the other way. And I just think that is such an unbelievably underrated and crucial skill for this team going forward, to have a guy who you trust to switch on literally anybody. He can guard 1 through 5. And I think he is one of the few players in the league where you're comfortable with saying he can guard 1 through 5 and still be a plus defender. And I don't think that's really up for debate. I think that most people would agree with me, especially if you're a Pistons fan or if you've watched the Pistons at all over the last couple of years. So I'm just very excited to see what Stu can do this year. I know in the Knicks series, it was a very big bummer not having him. I think he would have helped a lot in those Jalen Brunson isolations where he was able to draw fouls or was able to get back or to get by a Jalen Duren or a Tobias Harris or somebody who was switched onto him. Because when Ausar Thompson wasn't checking Jalen Brunson, it was pretty easy for him to get to the rim at will. And I think if Isaiah Stewart was on the floor, it would have been a lot harder to even not only get to the rim, but finish there because of Isaiah Stewart's rim presence. So the fact that he has such versatility on defense is very impressive, especially at his age. He's still very young. He's 24 years old. And the Pistons have him locked up for another couple of years. They have a team option on his last deal, or the last year of his deal. And I just love what he brings to the table overall. So I'm very glad that Trajan Langdon coming in didn't just completely ixnay Isaiah Stewart from the rotation or trade him or whatnot, but he rather kind of bought into what he brings to the table. And now we can see that being just a very valuable asset in the future of this team. So Absolutely love Isaiah Stewart overall. I know he's a little bit of a hothead, but at the end of the day, a guy like that who you can rely on to be your defensive anchor, especially coming off of the bench, is just very, very important. And we've seen a lot of these championship caliber teams have a guy like Isaiah Stewart. And I think, again, he's going to be very, very crucial to the success of this team and the longevity of this success going forward. So, very, very excited for Stu. Hopefully he makes a full recovery. I think that he is. I've heard that he looks great right now and is going to be fully ready to go for this year. But moving on, I wanted to talk about who I think the Pistons X factor is. And I know I've gone over all of these different underrated skills, which that in themselves are X factors for this team. But one player who I really think is the X factor, and the Pistons can only go as high as his ceiling will let them, is Ausar Thompson. The Pistons have solidified their franchise guy, and that's Cade Cunningham. I think last year was very indicative of that. He was one of the better players in the entire NBA, All-Star, All-NBA team, led this team to 30 more wins than they had the year before, a playoff appearance, multiple playoff wins. And the questions surrounding this team have nothing really to do with Cade Cunningham in himself, but rather, what are you going to do to surround him with a supporting cast that's going to let him succeed? And Ausar Thompson is one of those guys who plays much differently than Cade Cunningham, but complements his game in so many different ways. And obviously, before I really dive into Ausar Thompson, Jalen Duren, Jaden Ivey, Ron Holland, Isaiah Stewart, all of these different guys, Karis LeVert, Duncan Robinson, they can all be X factors in different ways, but I just think that Ausar is the X factor and is the guy who, like I said, his versatility that he brings to the table can transcend this team to new heights. And overall, the defense is where we kind of focus in on when talking about Ausar Thompson, and that's very true. When you look at his defensive numbers when he's on the floor, it's just unbelievable. The Pistons were the 28th ranked defense when it came to defensive rating when Ausar Thompson was out, and they jumped up into the top 5 when he was back. So clearly he makes them a much, much better defensive team overall. And then when you're looking at the opponents, their shot percentages around the rim and just their overall stats, their advanced stats, when Ausar Thompson was on the floor, the opponents score 3.2 less points per 100 possessions. They turn the ball over 2.3% more on average, and they shoot 1.3 less free throws per 100 field goals while Ausar Thompson is on the floor. So you can just see that right there. When he's on the floor compared to when he's off the floor, the Pistons are a better team defensively. And then when you look at the shot percentages of these teams, you can see that when Ausar Thompson is in the game, the opponents are shooting around 2.5% less from the rim than when he's in the game. And he obviously is great switching 1 through 5. He's a great perimeter, great rim defender. And the fact that at 6'7", his rim defense is as good as it is very, very important. But overall, I think that we kind of know what we have with Ausar Thompson's defense. He is going to have a ridiculously high defensive upside, and I really do think he can be a top 5 defender in the sport, be a perennial all-defensive team type of guy, and that's, I think, a given, and I don't think that's really debatable. But the one thing that's going to contribute to him really, really being that X factor is how his offensive game develops. And again, there's offensive statistics and numbers and metrics to back up the fact that the Pistons were better offensively when he was on the floor, despite the fact that he was not shooting three-pointers or jumpers for that matter at a very consistent clip whatsoever. When Ausar was in the game, the Pistons shot 7.1% more shots at the rim, and their efficiency was 1.5% better when he was in the game, or 1.3% better, from the rim when Ausar Thompson was in the game. They also shot 1.5% more short mid-range shots when Ausar Thompson was in the game. And I think this has a lot to do with his ability to play off ball. He cuts with conviction, and it becomes such a valuable asset to have around a facilitator of Cade Cunningham's caliber because he's so athletic, He's such a good lob threat. He can offensive rebound at an unbelievable rate as well. And those parts of his game are really where he's going to have to hone in on, because we've seen the jump shot and just the overall shot creation has a ton of work to do. But as he grows in himself and as he becomes a more consistent offensive player, the areas where he's going to succeed is, like I said, running the rim hard, finishing at the rim, offensive rebounding, playing really solid defense. And those attributes right there are at such a high level at a young age that they kind of mask his inefficiencies, like we've talked about with his jump shot. But again, as his offensive game develops and as he becomes more comfortable with the ball in his hands, he's only going to become more valuable. But right now, the fact that he complements Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham so well as a lob threat is very important for the floor spacing, and is important for Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham's ability to finish at the rim at a more efficient clip than they did last year. Having Ausar Thompson on the floor with Jaden Ivey is going to help that. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. And I'm just very, very excited to see what he can bring to the table in year 3 with a full offseason under his belt and just all of the upside in the world. So, again, very excited for Ausar Thompson. I think that he's going to have an unbelievable season, and I'll continue to talk about him throughout the offseason because he is one of my favorite players, not just on the team, but in the entire NBA. But moving on, I wanted to touch on Frank Urbina over at Hoops Hype dropped his point guard rankings for the next year. And I just wanted to go through the top 10 with you guys real quick. Coming in at number 10 is Tyrese Maxey. Number 9, De'Aaron Fox. Number 8, Ja Morant. Number 7, James Harden. Number 6, Trae Young. Number 5, Stephen Curry. Number 4, Cade Cunningham. Number 3, Jalen Brunson. Number 2, Luka Doncic. And number 1, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I'll just quickly read Urbina's description under Cade Cunningham and why he had him at 4. He says, one of the young players we believe could surpass Curry next season is Detroit Pistons star and former number 1 overall pick, Cade Cunningham. Cunningham just enjoyed easily the best season of his career, leading Detroit to a 44-38 regular season and to within 2 games of the second round of the playoffs. No small accomplishment considering how abysmal the team was just a few years ago. If Cunningham is able to make a similarly sized leap in 2025 as he has over the past couple of seasons, he could be a 30-point, 10 assists per game player next campaign, a scary proposition for Detroit's foes over the coming years. One of just 2 players to put up a 26, 6, and 9 stat line last season along with Jokic, Cunningham is already an all-NBA level performer, and with the leap we expect him to make in 26, he could be a first-team all-NBAer when it's all said and done. That's the type of talent Cunningham is, thanks to his tough shot making from all 3 levels, his ability to finish around the basket, his off-the-dribble pull-up shooting, and his somehow underrated playmaking. So, first reaction to this is just the talent at the point guard position in the NBA is just unbelievable. And the fact that you have different tiers of players from different age groups, you've got guys who are older like Steph and James Harden still playing at a very high level. And then you've got your players that are more in their prime like Jalen Brunson, Trae Young, Luka, and SGA, combined with kind of the new gen players in Cade Cunningham and Tyrese Maxey is very, very cool to see. I like the fact that the point guard position is very tiered right now in the NBA. There's a ton of talent at different age groups, and Cade Cunningham's kind of leading the charge for that 25 and under crew at the point guard position. And I just overall wanted to kind of give my thoughts where I see Cade at, if 4 is viable, and kind of how he can get up into that top 3 with SGA and Luka Doncic and kind of surpass Jalen Brunson. But right now, SGA and Luka, they're in a tier of their own right now as basketball players. They're better. Their team success and their individual success pretty much makes them a non-negotiable. They are ahead of Cade Cunningham, but that's not to say that Cade can't pass them in the future. There's definitely room for him to pass them. I don't know, SGA is a little bit harder because he did just win Finals MVP, lead his team to a championship all in the same year. But at the end of the day, Cade is still a very, very solid player, and I think he's a better facilitator than SGA. So there's different areas of Cade's game where you could say, yeah, he's a better true point guard than SGA, but just obviously with SGA's scoring prowess, that kind of gives him a little bit of an advantage. But with Luka Doncic, the scoring and the passing is very, very similar to what we've seen from Cade Cunningham in his first couple years in the NBA. And so I think those guys are very interchangeable in a lot of ways. As for Brunson, Cade has a case, but again, the playoff achievements and just the overall success he's had, especially in New York, definitely I think gives Brunson a little bit of an edge with room for Cade to pass him by the end of this year. I think that's very, very viable. And then for Steph Curry, right now I think Cade is better, but again, the fact that Steph Curry is one of the greatest, if not the greatest point guard of all time, and he's still playing at age 38 at such a high level is pretty remarkable. I think he's 38, 37. Let me know in the comments below. I think that he's around there. But still, nonetheless, even if he is 36, 37, 38, that is so unbelievably impressive that he's playing at the high level that he is. And the fact that he's still considered a top 5 point guard is extremely impressive. But other than that, I don't think there's really any debate that Cade is a top 5 point guard in the league, and I think 4 is very, very fair. I also think there's room for him to crack into the top 3 by the end of this year. But going into this season, where he's really only had one All-Star level caliber season, I think 4 is very fair. And again, I think Luka and SGA are kind of in a tier of their own, and Cade Cunningham has no doubt. There's no doubt that he can get up into that tier and kind of expand that going forward. So super excited to see kind of how Cade rounds himself out this year, not only as a point guard, but where he kind of ranks himself amongst the rest of the NBA. I think that he could be a top 10 player at the end of this year. I've talked about it before. I really do think that he has the skill set, has the ability to lead his team to a top 4 seed. And with what this team was 2 years ago, he is very, very deserving of being considered a top 10 player in the NBA. And it's only a matter of time before everyone else agrees with me. I think that if Cade Cunningham were to try and get up into that top 3 and kind of that upper echelon of point guard tiers in the NBA, I think the overall turnovers have to decrease, but with a player with his usage rate, I think that's going to be a lot harder than it is for somebody like SGA, who has a bunch of great facilitators around him. Cade Cunningham is that main ball handler, so the turnover numbers are always a little bit concerning, but I think those can go down relatively this year, just a little bit, even down from 3.5 to 3 would be a good leap for him. And then overall efficiency at the rim. I know last year the efficiency at the rim I think was his biggest gripe as a scorer, and I think that will go up. But other than those two, I don't think there's a single player in the league that can match his overall productivity as a scorer, facilitator, and defender besides Nikola Jokic. So really excited to see how his game rounds out this year. Excited to see how he meshes with Jaden Ivey. But let me know in the comments or over on Twitter if you think that Cade Cunningham is a top 5 point guard in the NBA. If you think he is above Jalen Brunson, just give me your overall thoughts. But before we wrap things up here, I wanted to just touch on the fact that the Pistons are now in a spot where they're in the national media spotlight. Brian Windhorst, he had a quote earlier today on Tuesday that I wanted to touch on. He said, "Detroit is a team to watch this year for several reasons. We'll see when the schedule comes out, but it wouldn't surprise me if they had some made-for-TV matchups and get more attention this season because of what they did last year." I don't know about you guys, but as a kid watching the Christmas games, the jerseys, the LeBron off the backboard dunk, the Kyrie step back were all very core memories, and it always kind of bummed me out that the Pistons never got that national spotlight on Christmas Day. And I think, obviously, this year that's not the case. They don't get a Christmas Day game, but they're on the right trajectory. And I think it's very, very exciting that this team is getting a Martin Luther King Jr. game again. They're going to be on national TV for that against the Celtics, I believe, and then they're going to get multiple more games that'll be nationally televised, one against the Cavaliers as well. So there is a lot of things to like about this young team, not just as a Pistons fan, but as a basketball fan. You know, the Pistons are no longer the laughingstock of the NBA, so we're starting to gain some respect amongst the rest of the NBA community, and people are actually understanding that this team has the ability to compete for Eastern Conference championships for the next 10, 15 years just with how young they are. And I think it's very, very simple algorithm overall. Is the better you are, the more National League televised games you're going to get. But the fact that the NBA is aware that people want to watch the Pistons is refreshing in itself. And I know it doesn't mean too much, and you actually have to go out and win those games for people to give you that respect. But at the end of the day, it's been a long time coming for this Pistons team. And the fact that people around the NBA are realizing how good this team is and how great their future looks is just, it feels good. It feels good to win those. So excited to see the Pistons hopefully get around 5 or 6, maybe even more nationally televised games compared to last year. And hopefully they can show out in those games and show the rest of the NBA that they're here to stay for a long, long time. But that's all I've got for you guys today. Let me know in the comments or over on Twitter your thoughts on Ausar Thompson being the Pistons X Factor. Also, just give me your thoughts on Frank Urbina's point guard rankings and what you think of Cade Cunningham coming in at number 4. And lastly, just your thoughts on the Pistons gaining national media attention and some matchups you'd like to see put on networks like ESPN and NBC next year. But as always, like, subscribe, comment, turn on post notifications, and follow me on Twitter over at Kyle Garrison 2. Also, head over to Spotify, leave a 5-star review and a follow if you can. Once again, thank you all so much for tuning in every single day. With that being said, that is going to do it here for episode 42 of Pistons Daily, and I will catch you all next time.